Hello, Mayor, Council members, and community. This is Sue Hagener, your Finance Director, and today I'd like to give you an overview of the city's financial performance for the last year. These results are, of course, not audited yet and will be subject to audit later this year. Overall, the city performed very well in 2025. Our operational funds, meaning the general fund, street operations, and both water and sewer operations, had relatively strong revenues, and expenditures came in under budget. And we ended the year with outstanding reserves, all in compliance with our reserve policies. And regarding capital projects, except within the last couple of years or so, the city has struggled to deliver capital projects due to supply chain issues or lack of city staffing to bring them to fruition. But this is changing to a fully staffed engineering department and a robust capital improvement program. So our capital projects continue in full swing and at historic levels. Now again, you have a lot of materials in your packet. This presentation for one, you've got narratives for each major fund and how it performed. You've got some graphs, and of course you've got this document, which you should all be really familiar with. It's our one-stop snapshot for how the city performed overall. And again, just let me take a minute to describe what you're seeing here. Down the left-hand side, you're going to see the name of the fund, the name and number of the fund. In columns 1 and 2, you see budgeted revenues and actual revenues for the year. In columns 3 and 4, you see budgeted expenditures and actual expenditures in column 4. And in 5 and 6, you have the net loss or the net gain in the fund balance. And finally, column 6 is your ending fund balance, which we compare to our reserve policies for compliance. I've highlighted a few notable items. First, we'll cover the items in yellow. The first is the general fund. You can see that overall revenues exceeded budget by about $217,000. Down below, you can see lodging tax. Again, we're talking about the yellow highlighted items. Lodging tax came in at about $60,000 in revenues over budget. Real estate excise tax performed very well at almost $400,000 above budget. Again, these revenues are difficult to predict. They depend on the real estate market, which is unpredictable. Down below that, you've got our equipment reserve, which benefited from insurance proceeds and interest revenue. And down farther on the graph, you'll see water and sewer revenues came in over budget and performed very well. Now, I've also highlighted some green items. The green items are some of our capital funds. The first green item I've identified is the street project fund. And you can see overall expenditures and revenues were significantly under budget. And that just depends on what we're getting done on our capital projects, right? Most of the time, if our expenditures are under budget, you'll see our revenues under budget because many of these projects rely on grant funding. So down the page you go, you'll see Parks Restricted is significantly under budget for expenditures, and that was because a playground project didn't come to fruition. But our biggest line items are our water projects and our sewer projects in green. We had some significantly large capital projects in water and sewer, namely the Silberhorn Deep Well and the West Squim Bay Sewer Lift Station that got delayed a little bit. So we didn't spend as much and we didn't receive as much in grant proceeds as a result. And the reason why I've highlighted these green items is that we've seen our budgets grow from 20 to 30 million per year, up to as much as 55, $60 million budgets, and that's primarily because of our capital improvement program. Again, and if those projects don't come to fruition, it leaves us significantly under budget, which isn't a bad thing. It's just kind of a further explanation of how we budget for things, and when things don't happen that we expect, it results in significant changes from actual to our budgeted expectations. All right, let's talk about one of our most important funds, which is our general fund. We had a beginning fund balance of $3.9 million. It was over what we forecasted by about $538,000. It still complied with fund balance policy. Again, it represents a reserve or a cushion or beginning cash. And so because we were significantly over what we forecasted, we used some of that fund balance for capital and to fortify our street operations fund and to fortify our equipment reserve. Our revenues of $13.8 million were $219,000 or 2% more than budget, and you can see here some of the reasons why we performed so well. There was sales tax over budget, property taxes were a little over budget, utility taxes came in strong. Our licenses and permits related to the development were under budget. Intergovernmental revenues, which is grants, came in a little over budget. Charges for goods and services came in a little under budget, primarily due to development-related revenues, and our miscellaneous revenues, which is primarily interest income, came in just 1% under budget. So let's take a closer look at one of the most important sources of revenue to the general fund, and that's your sales tax revenue. It actually represents about 53% of all general fund taxes. So this is a graph of all the major sales tax categories that we track and the receipts by month. So you'll see up in the upper right-hand corner, there's an arrow that points to the receipts by the month and another arrow that points to the budget by the month. And again, we compare receipts to our budget on a monthly basis. We track it very closely. The major categories are food services and accommodations, construction, retail, wholesale, and other. And as you can see, the purple retail portion is the largest component of total receipts at around 60% of total receipts. So again, Sequim is the retail mecca for the peninsula. Another something notable in 2025 is the construction-related sales tax. That sits around 15% of total proceeds and is much, much higher than the typical 7 or 8% of total receipts. We consider that one-time revenue because the construction market, very closely tied to the real estate market, and development can be a very, very fickle line item. Just a reminder that receipts come in 2 months after they are earned. So Christmas receipts that are collected in December, we actually see those receipts as a city in February. And where our Lavender Festival results happen in July, those activities actually hit the books for the city in September. And they're some of the largest monthly receipts recorded during the year. Total sales tax recorded for the year was $4.6 million and exceeds prior year receipts by about $157,000 or 4%. So really, really excellent growth in our sales tax categories. And this is a historical look at another really important source of revenue to the general fund. Municipalities are allowed to levy a tax on any utility that operates within the city limits. You can see on the far right-hand side that we collect about $2 million in utility taxes in 2025. And you can also tell from the upward trend that this is a very stable source of revenues and grows at about an average of 4% per year. We collect utility tax on electric, garbage, cable, telephone, and water and sewer. And this is a historical look at another great source of revenue to the general fund, our property tax. Again, it's important to have a diverse portfolio of resources to protect against economic downturns and unexpected events. Our certified payroll tax levy for 2025 was $1.866 million, an increase to $1.915 million in 2026, which is an increase of about $50,000 a year. It doesn't grow significantly from year to year, but again, it is an important source of revenue to general governmental services. Shifting gears to general fund expenses, we had total expenses of $14.5 million, and they were right on target with budget, about $43,000 under budget. Thank goodness our wages and benefits were under budget by about $185,000 or 2%, because a lot of our other line items were over budget, and there's good reason for that. As for wages and benefits, we experienced significant savings on retirement and medical benefits, if you can believe it. Medical was due to our Well City designation, so go team. Supplies were just a little more than budgeted. Services, about $61,000 more than budgeted, and that's primarily due to the annual insurance assessment from WCIA and our IT and subscriptions, which continue to grow. We were also over in our intergovernmental category by about $44,000, and that's because we had an unanticipated state audit in 2025. We expected to be on a 2-year audit schedule, and they decided to show up at our door after just 1 year, which is a great thing. We also had some unanticipated election related services that went into this category. Now, since wages and benefits make up about 70% of our operational expenditures in the general fund, I thought we'd take a specific look at these costs over the years. It shows the history of wages in green and benefits in blue over the years. And again, this is specific to the general fund, whose staff provide general governmental services that include your clerk, your city management, human resources, your city attorney, your police, parks, planning and development, engineering, and information technology. In 2010, we had 55 employees in the general fund, serving a population of 6,600, or about 12 employees serving every 1,000 citizens. And then in 2025, with a population of 8,400, we had 77 staff members providing those services, which is about 10 employees providing services per 1,000. Let's see here. So population of 6,600 in 2010 to 2025, it grew about 27%, or about 2% per year. There was about a 31% growth in the number of positions providing general government services, and again, it averaged out to about a 2% per year. And finally, we'll conclude on the general fund. We had excellent revenues. We have a very strong ending fund balance. Our expenditures were under budget, and we ended the year with $3.2 million in the general fund reserves, or approximately 91% of policy maximum. Our target policy balance is between $2.4 million at a minimum and $3.6 million as a maximum. And again, remember, we did a budget amendment to use excess beginning fund balance to support capital projects, street operations, and the equipment reserve. So overall, a good year. Now let's briefly discuss street operations. We had revenues of $1.3 million that were under budget by about 5%, and that was primarily related to less than stellar motor vehicle tax receipts, as well as fewer transfers in from the Transportation Benefit District tax to support the fund. But you'll see here our sources of revenue are primarily from the general fund. $810,000 was transferred from the general fund to support street operations. The expenditures of $1.2 million were just basically right on target with budget. And this budget pays for street signs, road paint, street markings, de-icer, sand, light poles, signals, utilities for those two things, asphalt, fuel, and equipment parts. And thanks to an additional transfer from the general fund, we ended with a fund balance of $286,000, which is right at about policy midpoint. And a real quick word about water operations. We had revenues of $3.2 million and was 4% over budget, so that was nice. We think due to growth and just a little bit of that rate adjustment we did in 2025. Our expenses of $3.4 million were basically right on target, or $18,000 less than budget. Salaries and benefits, again, that's a common theme. It was 10% below budget, primarily due to savings on retirement and medical benefits. Supplies right on target. Services were a little bit below, but we ended up the year with a fund balance of about $1 million. It's below policy midpoint, but still within policy guidelines. And another quick note about sewer operations, where we had $5.6 million in revenues. That was 1% over budget. Not as much growth in this particular operational budget. We had expenses of $5.3 million, and those were $200,000 or 4% under budget, with most categories under budget. So way to go, sewer ops. And we ended the year with $2.8 million in our reserves, which frankly is above our policy max and gives us the opportunity to transfer more money into capital projects and debt in 2026. So let's take a look at some other funds that are very important to the city's budget. This is the equipment reserve we're going to talk about. We had total expenditures of $956,000, and it was under budget by about $14,000 or 2%, primarily due to some savings made by purchasing used equipment rather than brand new equipment. And before we go over kind of a list of some of the major purchases, I do want to mention that when we take the Gallup poll of our employees, we frequently rate very, very high on the very first question, which is, do you have the materials and tools required to do your job? The city consistently rates very high in this category. It's super important to us to make sure that our equipment is in safe and good condition so we can get to work safely and efficiently, right? We did about $95,000 in IT projects were booked there. We bought a couple of police cars, tasers, and drone training and other drone-related stuff. We replaced a mower, 4 trucks, including a dump with a sander, backhoe, and a forklift. We used both new and used purchases to replace these items. And new to our inventory was a scissor lift, which allows us to do our own work instead of renting out that work for our facilities around the city. We bought 2 message boards, electronic message boards, an excavator, a backhoe, a snow plow for the trucks, and another truck. Again, new and used items were purchased for savings here. We ended with a fund balance of $2 million, and that is at 101% of the minimum required 2.5 years of scheduled replacement. Some other funds that I'd like to chat about are the 206 debt service funds. We had adequate funding for our Civic Center bonds in this fund. The lodging tax fund, revenues of $652,000 were 10% over budget. Expenditures were under budget as well, so the lodging tax fund performed very well. A special shout out to real estate excise tax that came in about $400,000 over budget. Again, those funds are used specifically for capital projects. And our rainy day fund ended the year with about $950,000 in balances. Finally, let's talk a little bit about capital expenditures or capital projects. This is a history of what we have spent on capital projects since 2017. And look at 2024 and 2025. Again, 2025 was another record year for capital projects at about $7.4 million. We had about $3 million in street and stormwater projects, and about $4.4 million in other projects. But you can see clearly, if you look from 2023 back through 2017, there was no other year like 2024 and 2025. So thank you, Public Works Department, and thank you, grants and loans that helped fund all of those wonderful infrastructure projects. And of that $7.4 million, this is kind of a summary of what was all worked on. We had water projects of about $800,000, our Reservoir Road booster station. You all know about our water meter auto read project. That was wrapping up this year. We did some work on West Sequim Bay and the Silverhorn Deep Well. For sewer projects, again, West Sequim Bay was, although we didn't do as much work as we had anticipated there on that booster station, we did do some design work, I believe, and some other stuff. Doe Run Lift Station, again, the water meter auto read projects, sewer benefits from those auto reads, aerobic digester engineering, sewer master plan, manholes, pumps. On streets, we wrapped up the North Sequim Avenue sidewalk and bike lane project. We had tons and tons of pavement preservation and rehab projects. We had a huge curb ramp replacement project, just to name a few. And on parks, we got our Carrie Blake Park bridges. We did some Centennial Park design. We worked on our ADA transition plan, and we paved a pathway around the band shell. We also did a lot of work on the city shop property related to utilities. We did some civic center improvements, and we installed a brand new parking lot behind the civic center for about 1.4 of all three of those projects. As a final note, I just wanted to mention that the reports that you have in your packet today, those don't really reflect the state auditor's requirements. They're really specific to the city's operations. So the state auditor's requirements aren't necessarily reflected in these reports. We have to file an annual report with the state auditor every year, and that is due 150 days after the end of the fiscal year, which is typically right around May 30th. We are audited every year per the state requirement. We were on a 2-year schedule after COVID, but that switched in 2025. And we've got over 32 years of clean audit history. So I want to thank you for listening today, and of course I will be there on Monday night to answer any questions that you have. Thanks for listening.